Hi, I'm Farron Cousins from Ring of Fire, sitting in for David Pakman. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show. A very interesting development happened at the end of last week. News reports came out that oil companies are now begging the federal government for money in order to protect them from the effects of climate change. These same oil companies, by the way, who are in court all over the country arguing that they shouldn't be held liable for the damages that are being caused by climate change that they've known about for decades, just didn't tell anybody, even hid it from their own shareholders. But now, those down in Texas are begging the federal government to come in with billions of dollars, $12 billion they want from the federal government to help protect their oil refining facilities down there in Texas from climate change. So why now? Well, as you'll recall, last year we had Hurricane Harvey. It devastated the city of Houston, Texas. And Houston obviously is a very big oil refining city, along with all the outliers. And it was also horribly flooded. Flood of the century, they said. And then we saw more floods like that just in the same year. But nonetheless, chemicals, toxins, toxic waste from these refineries and other chemical plants in the area were all leaked into that water, contaminated the groundwater, contaminated the Gulf of Mexico when they receded into there. All in all, really bad. The oil refineries were partly responsible for that, along with the chemical plants. But they understood something that most of the media wasn't really talking about, and that is that this massive storm and the massive flood was the result. It's what we get with climate change. That's what happens. And they want to make sure that it doesn't happen again. They don't want to be liable for when the next time a flood comes and all their toxic chemicals go out into people's waterways and the drinking water and their homes and the soil. So they want the government to come in with $12 billion to create massive seawalls to help work on water redirection plans to protect their refineries. But it's not just about refineries, obviously, or liabilities. It's they don't want their operations to be interrupted at all. They still want to be able to refine that oil, get it out there, so we put it in our cars, we use it to make plastic, whatever it is we need to do. They want to keep supplying that oil, so we keep burning it. They just don't want to pay for any of the problems that it causes when we do that. And again, I can't stress this enough. They're arguing in courts all across this country. In fact, they've had, I think, 3 major legal victories in just the last few weeks, where cities and states are suing oil companies for the cost of climate change that those cities are having to deal with. Rising sea levels, increased floods, things like that. The cities incur the cost, which means taxpayers, and they just want the oil companies to come in and pay their fair share. They did help create this problem, but courts across the country are actually throwing those suits out at the request of the oil industry. Why? Because from a strict liability standpoint, it is difficult to say that Exxon is responsible for X amount of pollution, and that X amount of pollution is responsible for Y amount of climate change. Almost impossible to really come up with those particular equations. Therefore, liability is impossible to determine, and that's why these lawsuits are getting thrown out. It's sad, it's unfortunate, but these oil companies know. They know what they've been doing for decades. They know they've been covering it up for decades. And now they want to take $12 billion from our already cash-strapped government to protect their facilities. They also say that, oh, this protects the nearby communities as well, because the seawall won't let them get flooded. People need to be protected from the effects of climate change. But here's the thing. When your industry is already getting subsidized to the tune of between $4 and $7 billion every year from the federal government, you don't really deserve any other handouts. Hell, you don't even deserve those handouts to begin with, but you're still getting them. So if you want money from the federal government that's coming from the taxpayers, if you want that money to mitigate the effects of climate change, then you can take it out of those subsidies that you get every year. Or, and this is just crazy talk, The fact that you're a 20 or 30 billion dollar per year in profit oil company, maybe you could just take like half of that for 1 year, and that's more than enough to cover the cost of that. There you go. I just solved your problem. More importantly, you want to solve the problem, stop doing what you're doing. Stop producing fossil fuels and instead redirect your company to become a renewable energy company. Instead of refining oil, start building solar panels. Instead of drilling for oil, start making windmill turbines. Redirect your employees to focus on a new area, retrain them, rebrand your entire business, become the leader in that industry. But you won't, because nobody at any of these companies has any kind of forward thinking. They all want to look backwards. They all want to say, there's still a little bit of oil. Oh, there's still a little bit of coal over here in this mountain, even though the coal industry is dying. I think I can scrape some off the top if you give me a toothpick or something. That's the point we're at, folks. They are going to do everything possible until the very last ounce of fossil fuel on this continent is extracted and burned. And then, once there is nothing left to refine, once there is nothing left to burn, they'll finally look at it and say, okay, let's get started on making some solar panels then. And by then it'll be too late. You'll already have other companies that came in and started making them, and they've cornered the market. Now, I'm no economist here, but it seems to me that any one of these massive oil companies that is sitting on billions and billions of dollars in the bank, if they truly want to secure their business's long-term future, it would be to switch over to renewables right now. Right now. The technology exists. And with the scientists you have working for you, with the resources that you have, I'm sure you could make that technology even better. You could become the most profitable company on the planet, and you could be protecting the planet at the same time. But we do not have enough forward-thinking individuals in any of the fossil fuel industries to actually put that idea into practice. Instead, they would rather go down with the ship, extract the last little bit of fossil fuel from the planet that they can, and then at that point, maybe have a strategy meeting about how to move forward.